What is up, everybody? Sysadmin Sean here with another Sysadmin Struggles video for you. And today we're going to talk about shadow IT. Some of you have probably heard about this before. Some of you may have not. For those who don't know, shadow IT is kind of like any sort of IT function or service that is stood up at your workplace that IT either doesn't know about or someone in IT knows about it and is not telling everyone else about it. There's a few other examples of shadow IT, but those are pretty much your broad main categories that sort of trickle down on the other things. So how does shadow IT occur? Usually it is one of a few different things. One option is that maybe a department wants a new piece of software because it has a certain feature they really like. They ask to get that software and someone says, well, no, you can't have that. We already have that product with blah. So then they might end up purchasing it anyway and running it in an improper fashion so that they can access the feature they want and IT not know about it until a later date. Another way shadow IT can come about is someone not even discussing things with IT or anyone else at work and potentially hiding equipment somewhere in the environment to do these services for them or do things that they want done that they couldn't get approval for. I've seen situations where there have been IT people that have hidden network equipment in the raised floor of our server room. I've heard of situations where people hid computers and equipment in the ceiling and dropped ceilings so that they could hook in cameras and monitor situations where they weren't really supposed to have cameras or, store data somewhere that was kind of out of sight, out of mind. I've seen situations where people have plugged in switches and hubs and routers in places that they are not supposed to be plugged in, thus causing larger network outages. Those are all sort of shadow IT situations. So one of the things is you look at shadow IT as sort of a problem from both ends. You have your IT department that wants to do everything a certain way because that's a good process to follow. And then you have departments that want things that IT is not letting them have or is their needs aren't being met. So how do you fix that? Well, communication is the number one tool. Both parties really need to sit down and kind of hash out exactly what the problem is. So let's say we go back to that example of software with a feature that isn't available in the current product portfolio that IT is offering the end users. If this feature is going to bring a lot of value to the company, or if it's going to, have a justifiable use case and the expense is justifiable, then usually there's no problem with making an exception, short of it being some sort of crazy product that is from some single developer that lives in a different time zone and doesn't offer 24/7 support. So if the product is down, all these things have to be discussed with the end user. Hey, do you really want this? Is it going to meet your needs? Is it worth the cost? And if they say yes and they're willing to pay for it and you can adequately support it, then that's usually fine. Sometimes there are situations where IT has a blanket no statement, and that's usually not the best way to go from an IT perspective to the end user. There may be reasons they have a blanket no, and those could be very important. There could be security concerns. There could be any sort of limitations and guidelines being put upon your environment that you as an end user may not be aware of. There may be things in your environment that you as an IT person may not be aware of. If you have to meet certain requirements and situations for insurance, for clearance, for any sort of potential research, and then there's limitations to what you can do and what you can offer. And those are the really bad scenarios when you find out you have shadow IT and you've essentially broken the law and you have to figure out, well, who did this? Why did they do it? How long have they been doing it? And tons of other stuff. That's the worst kind of shadow IT, anytime it breaks the law. And then the end users have to be compromising as well. They need to understand that if you have Excel, then you don't need Google Sheets. There's no justification in spinning up a Google domain for 2 users at your workplace to use Google Sheets. Now, what that means that they'll go out and make private Gmail accounts and use Google Sheets. A lot of times what happens is storage is usually the big one. That's what I've seen a million times over as far as shadow IT. IT will either offer a file share system or a cloud storage option, OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, any of those situations. And it doesn't meet all the needs of the department. They need more space and they don't want to pay for it. They need more users to have access to things, and they don't want to they don't want to answer some questions. Or the opposite. They're only able to offer so much via a certain resource. And at a certain point, the cost outweighs the justification. So what people will do is they'll go out and make private accounts for things. And then you end up, again, in a legal situation. A lot of times PII data could be out there. HIPAA data could be out there. Any amount of secure data that is not supposed to be in a cloud-based share drive is available, and then ends up getting shared out to people that probably don't need access to it, or did need access to it and don't need it anymore, but it's not being audited because it's not part of IT. So it gets missed because it's in the shadows. Those are the kind of things that we really strive to not have occur in IT departments, but are usually the most common at the same time. Yes, we can continue to give you a SharePoint site with multiple terabytes of space, but there's a limit to how much we can spend, because at a certain point we have to buy a higher price of licensing, and then we have to pay for another number of people. So is it worth giving you a better SharePoint site if we have to purchase 500 more licenses for that same amount of storage? If we had 500 different users coming together and saying, we all need this, then it's totally justifiable. But we get one-offs, and we can't buy one-offs. So we have to say, well, we can't afford that right now. Please try to utilize your space differently. Clear out some of your stuff. You'll hear this a lot from IT people if you're an end user. Clear up your network drives. Clean up your OneDrives. Clean up your SharePoint sites. Remove data you don't need anymore, because we're just trying to save the organization money. We're not trying to be sticklers about your data. I mean, we are, because you should be a stickler about your data too, but don't go out and get a Dropbox because you can't find some place to put some data that you probably don't need anymore. And that's kind of like a good basis for shadow IT. I'd love to hear in the comments below what kind of shadow IT situations other sysadmins that watch this channel have seen, so that the new people that are learning about shadow IT can get some ideas as to what kind of crazy stuff they might run into in their workplaces. Like I said, I've seen networking gear that's not supposed to be where it needs to be, computer equipment hidden in ceilings and in floors. I've seen closets full of equipment that nobody knew about because somebody just kind of hoarded it, and then they got let go, or they left and retired and they just left everything in the closet because it wasn't their problem anymore. And it turns out that that was running half of the environment for some piece of software or for some group of users. And now it's IT's problem, and they really don't want to deal with it. All that to say, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy what you're seeing, and we'll see you in the next one.